Commissioners, at our May 12th meeting, you passed a motion creating the airport's Fly Healthy at SEA initiative, which is focused on restoring customer confidence in air travel. The motion directed staff to explore the implementation of an interim temperature check program and to engage local, state, and federal stakeholders for a national system of health screening for air travelers. This briefing will review our actions to date, which includes enhanced cleaning, physical distancing, and Mask Up SEA campaign. I'm just going to introduce Lance Lyttle, Managing Director for Aviation, and then he'll pass us through the rest of the presentation. I believe Julie Collins, Director, Customer Service, Customer Experience and Brand Strategy will be a big participant. Lance?
Thank you, Executive Director of Metric. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm looking for Julie. Both of us will be doing the presentation, and I think someone going to be sharing the presentation for us.
Yes, I'm getting that pulled up on screen right now, and Julie should also be unmuted.
Okay. I'm looking for her, but I don't see her as yet.
All right, Julie, I'm going to go ahead and send the unmute prompt again.
Okay. Is Julie there? Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and get started. Commissioners, and Executive Director Metric, as you recall, when we first faced the COVID-19 pandemic, we essentially asked ourselves three questions, and the answers to those three questions essentially guided our response to the pandemic. So we asked ourselves, what is it that we needed to do in order to weather the storm? That was the first question. The second one was, what do we need to do in order to lead the recovery effort? And then the third question was, what is it that we need to do to prepare the organization for the next norm, or for the new norm, as some folks call it? And so initially answering the first question, we decided that in order to weather the storm, there's some immediate actions that we had to take in order for us to survive. But we also needed to take action for our tenants as well in order for them to survive. So immediately we started with, some drastic cost reduction from a budgetary perspective. We had our employees working from home, but in addition to that, we had immediate deferrals for most of our tenants at the airport. Again, the objective was to weather the storm. And then the second thing was, how do we lead the recovery effort? And that's where the Fly Healthy at SEA initiative was created, to help us to lead the recovery effort. The airport is a $22.5 billion economic impact on the region, and so it was essential that we were a major force in leading the recovery. And so we're going to be giving you a briefing on the Fly Healthy at SEA initiative. Next slide, please. So as Steve pointed out, some of the goals for the Fly Healthy at SEA initiative is to maintain a safe and healthy environment. And we say maintain because the airport has always been a safe environment. There's always been a healthy environment. But COVID-19, of course, has essentially just put a whole new light and meaning to what it means to be healthy. And we're going to talk about some of the things that we're doing to make our airport one of the safest and the healthiest airport. It was also very important that we restore the confidence in air travel, not just for passengers, but also for the tenants at the airport. It's important that our passengers, members of the public, are confident in coming to the airport, but it was also important that our employees and the tenants and the people who do business here, whether it's consultants or contractors, people working on construction projects, that they're confident that when they're here at the airport, they're in a safe and healthy environment. And prior to COVID-19, there was a zest and zeal and enthusiasm for travel, and we also wanted to renew or restore that enthusiasm for travel. And then the fourth one was, of course, to return passenger volumes to the airport, right? Even though we do approximately 450,000 metric tons of cargo at this airport, the lifeblood of this airport is passengers, right? Pretty much every tenant, every business that operate here either rely on passenger traffic directly or indirectly. You heard from the taxi operators earlier. There is the TNTs, Uber, Lyft, and Wings, our rental-car companies, the airlines, airport dining and retail. Every tenant at this airport rely directly or indirectly on passenger traffic. And that's why it was extremely important that this is one of the objectives, to return the passenger volumes and, of course, the economic vitality or economic impact that we have on the region. Next slide, please. And so there are some initial actions that we've taken. Enhanced cleaning. Immediately, we started a huge cleaning effort, especially in the high-touch area, that has expanded to the entire airport. And hopefully by August 1st, we're working with the TSA right now. You'll see even more cleaning. We're going to have a full-time employee at the TSA checkpoint, and they'll be cleaning the bins, the bowls, the divesting areas, the recomposure areas, the railings. They're cleaning them right now on a frequent basis, but now they're going to be cleaned every hour. And so we're going to have someone full-time there. You've seen signs all over the airport to facilitate physical distancing. I think there are about 3,000 new signs that we have put up. There's going to be about 4,000 additional signs that we're going to be putting in. You've seen the floor decals from us, from the airlines as well. We have more than 250 hand sanitizers, and you can actually locate these hand sanitizers using our app here at the airport. And communication has been extremely important to us. Again, communication to members of the public and to passengers traveling through the airport, but again, also to the people who do business here at the airport, and people who are contracted to work here at the airport. It's important that we communicate with them. So we have done electronic newsletters, blogs, social media, paid advertisement, and we have regular engagement meetings with pretty much all our tenants here at the airport. And then partner collaboration is very important. For us to have a safe and healthy environment, and for us to have almost a touchless experience for our passengers coming through the airport, we have to collaborate with everyone in the entire supply chain, whether it's the taxis and limousines all the way to the airlines, or airport dining and retail, TSA, CBP, and our external entities such as the CDC and the Department of Health. So partner collaboration is extremely important. Before I hand over to Julie to take us through the rest of the presentation, I really just want to recognize Julie for her leadership in leading this Fly Healthy at SEA, and our supporting cast, Wendy Ryder and Laurel Dunphy and Eric Fitch, and too many people to name. I'm going to get in trouble with calling names, but they've done a fantastic job so far leading this effort. So at this point in time, I'm going to hand over to Julie to take us through the rest of the presentation. Julie there?
I show her as being unmuted. I'm not hearing her at all. Julie, I'm going to mute you again and then send the prompt one more time. And once you get the prompt, you'll need to unmute yourself. Julie, thought I heard something, but I could be wrong. Julie, you might try dialing into the meeting so that we can hear you, or leaving the meeting and then rejoining. I'm not sure what.
Maybe we go to the next. I'll just take the next slide and see if she'll be ready. It's on the next slide. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So one of the challenges that we faced was once we implemented the mask requirements at the airport. Of course, compliance was a major issue for us, or concern for us. So initially, when we started, we were not seeing the compliance that we needed at the airport. And so Julie and the team came up with the Mask Up at SEA initiative, where we have volunteers and we have our pathfinders roaming on the entire terminal with masks, and they would hand these masks out to people who were not wearing a mask. Since then, the compliance numbers have gone up significantly. As you can see, we have handed out over 2,100 face coverings that we have distributed, and the compliance rate have gone up significantly, around 95%. And we've gotten a lot of positive feedback and response from the members of the public that are traveling through our airport. Do we have Julie now?
I'm not sure. I'm still showing her as unmuted.
Julie's on now in my office. Okay, I'm getting a text that she's on. Laurel, are you there?
Who are you?
Laurel, if you're on, you could go ahead and join us.
Are you calling for Laurel Dunphy?
Yes, could you unmute her, please?
Yes. Looks like Laurel has joined from her phone. So Laurel, you'll need to press *6 to unmute whichever phone you use to call in. Are you there?
Hey,
Perfect.
this is Julie Collins. I'm talking from Laurel's phone. Does that work now?
Yes, yep, I can hear you.
Okay, very good. Well, we're resourceful here at the airport, and so I'll just add one comment about the mask up effort, and thanks so much, Lance, for talking about the work that's been done. We've actually had now over 3,000 coverings that have been distributed as of yesterday, so it's a very well received and popular program. Next slide, please. So we wanted to set the context for our conversation today and remind us where we were on May 12th. We're very glad not to be where we were in terms of our passenger volume, to see that improvement since the April time frame. We also have had a little bit of a change in terms of health information during that time. We've learned more about COVID. Some of the indications of temperatures have now been impacted by the fact that we see people that are asymptomatic. And so we continue to learn more and more about COVID clearly in the last couple months. And then finally in May, when we last provided a really overarching update to you, we thought that the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, was on the path toward having a temperature pilot, and that they were really moving toward that expectation that really airports and airlines had around having a federal agency take over this kind of an activity for the long term. TSA has really taken a step back from indicating that it plans to do that. We did see last week some legislation that was introduced, bipartisan legislation in the House that was introduced to require TSA to do a pilot where 10 airports would be chosen. We don't know what the prospects are for that legislation. So at this point, while there is perhaps a congressional track, we are waiting to see if TSA were to move forward. At this point, it doesn't appear that they intend to do that. We did want to note the May 12th motion, and certainly the direction that you gave us that we've been working diligently on for the last 2 months. Next slide, please. So one of the issues that we wanted to touch on to really, again, set the context for our conversation today and for this briefing is around the complexity that comes along with setting up a health screening, such as a temperature screening, that hasn't been done at a large hub airport here in the U.S. And for the Port of Seattle, for our governance structure, we're an economic development entity, and so it's very important that we have health partners that would be part of this type of work. The kinds of partners here are entities that we've been closely engaged with over the last 2 months, working closely with the State Department of Health, with Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, who have a role in the FIS, and certainly with the airlines. The airlines have such an important role to play when it comes to having the ability to decline boarding, if need be, to a person who might be ill. We've also been looking at the issues around having private staffing, a health contractor type of staffing who could facilitate this type of temperature check program here at the airport. Finally, another complexity that we know is around this issue is the FAA, whose policy would be for airports not to be spending airport-related dollars on health screenings, since that's not considered an FAA airport mandated type of program. Next slide, please. So just to make sure we have a same understanding around some of the work that's been done since May 12th, our first step, we realized, was really understanding if we were to do this type of screening here at the airport, what would be the right kind of equipment to use. And so we did do some testing in the Federal Inspection Station area, our customs area, with international passengers in June. And as you can see here, we had voluntary screening. There was a lot of signage that notified people if they didn't want to do this, they could certainly opt out, that their data, their personal information was not being stored. We had about 1,400 passengers that went through, and we learned some really important things from this. We learned that false readings around hot items, if you've just packed away your laptop, or if you even have a hot sandwich, that could trigger a false reading on the equipment. We really realized that glasses, hats, other types of restrictions in front of people's faces were problematic. We also saw that passengers were really receptive. There really were no opt-outs. We had people that were very open to having their temperatures screened. Many of them, being international passengers, had their temperature screened on the way to our airport in another country. So a lot of receptivity. And as you'll note here, no temperatures over 100. 100.4 was that margin that we were looking at in terms of anything over that being a triggering a temperature check. And then staffing insights, that it does take at least a couple people we found in the FIS were needed to both look at the monitor as well as to engage with the customers. Next slide, please. And so that work in the FIS really helped lay the groundwork for the proof of concept. And we knew with this kind of a new and untested program that it was really important to have a chance to kind of test it from beginning to end, if you will. And so what that really meant was if a person had a temperature, having then procedures in place for how that would be handled. And that was what we are able to do right now. We're in the midst of that at Checkpoint 5 in our main terminal. In working with Alaska Airlines, they are providing that next step, that if a person has a temperature, there is medical screening, medical evaluation that is available through contracted staff with Alaska Airlines. At this point, however, we've screened about 6,700 people since the pilot started. We've not had any elevated temperatures, so we haven't had an opportunity to take that secondary step of evaluating if a person had a temperature, what might be the cause of it. And that really is what's involved in that secondary set of screening that is more appropriate for a health provider or an entity like Alaska Airlines that, again, has that decision-making authority to determine if somebody should or should not be boarding a plane. We still saw and still are seeing issues with hats and glasses, and so we actually have some very large signage that we've added that helps people prepare before they go through our screening process to remove those items. We do know that as people are realizing, oh gosh, I need to take off my hat or my glasses, that it does slow the line a bit, so there are some issues around passenger flows. We've also seen that the staff demands are higher in the main terminal. There's more going on, but also just getting people to look in the direction of the camera has been an issue, and again, asking people to remove hats and glasses. So a little bit higher level of staffing than we originally anticipated. And again, it's been well received. It's been very well received by the public, and it's been a really helpful and informative proof of concept that we've been going through. Next slide, please. So as we think about temperature screening and about the work that you asked us to do to think about what would be involved in implementing a program like this, here are some of the issues that we are still working on and are really important in terms of this kind of a program. We know that the health partners are a really important part of this. The airlines, again, I noted that Alaska is participating with us on this current proof of concept. Their preference continues, though, to be that for a long-term, a more mandatory type of temperature screening program, that a federal agency like the TSA is really, in their minds, the better entity to manage this so there's consistency across the country. We do continue to work with the health departments and with the CDC. There are differences between arriving passengers and departing passengers that come into play. But again, those partnerships are necessary to make sure we have the right elements in place for this type of a program, were it to be a more mandatory ongoing program. As I mentioned earlier, the issues around the FAA and their policy interpretations around what constitutes an airport duty and when can airport dollars be used. As I mentioned, they have decided, they have provided guidance that they do not see this type of health screening as an airport responsibility, an airport activity, if you will. And so in conversations early on with the Port Commission, with you, and collectively we've recognized that we would have to think about other funding sources for this type of a program, and that's that notation that you see there then around the tax levy. In terms of the costs, we know that the cost for equipment, if we had to purchase our own, is about $30,000 for each one of these telethermographic devices. We would need probably 5 or 6. It'd be good to have one on reserve, so perhaps 7 if we were in the FIS and in the main terminal. We also have currently an active solicitation where we have received requests from companies that provide private health contracting. Some of those companies do have their own equipment, and that will certainly be one of the aspects that we'll be talking with these companies about. We had 7 companies that responded, and we've narrowed that down to a smaller group for interviews, and that's actively happening this week. So we'll have a much better sense of the costs. But I think it's fair to say that this is an expensive type of staffing. You would need a health background or health capabilities, and so that does add to the cost. To look in the millions for an annual type of contract would be reasonable to expect. In terms of public feedback, we continue to outreach with the public, both through some of our informal survey processes as well as the feedback that we receive through our various social media and customer comment capabilities. And for many, I would say a large number of the public, 70%, look at temperature screenings as something that's positive. There's ranges of that. Within that 70%, you have people who are feeling like this is something that should have been done ages ago, and you have others that are more, well, gosh, if it could help, yeah, why not? And so we're going to continue to evaluate that type of feedback that we're receiving, but we know that there is certainly interest in from some of our public, a majority of our public, in this type of an added layer. And that's one of the things that Lance talked about at the beginning of this presentation, is the multi-layered nature of FlyHealthy at SEA, because we all recognize it's not any one particular step that we can take to restore that customer confidence and to help people feel more safe and confident in flying. It's multiple layers, and so this is certainly one of those layers you've asked us to look at. And then finally, there continue to be just legal issues that we're working through to better understand, because this is a different, unprecedented type of activity, that we want to make sure that we're doing things that are legally consistent. Next slide, please. So today we wanted to share with you, from a staff perspective, some of the alternatives for your consideration that we think fit within next steps for this work. One of them, alternative A, would be we could move forward with some random temperature screenings. And this, the issue of maybe temperature screenings are a deterrent was one of the issues that we've been talking about with commissioners over the last couple months, and particularly with the Aviation Commission committee, around if you think you might get your temperature taken, even if you don't know with certainty, would that perhaps be a deterrent to even coming to the airport if you have a temperature and you're not feeling well? And so that's what this alternative really tries to address, is that potential of could it be a deterrent. As you can see here, again, the issues around airline participation, around our lack of ability to follow up with a person who may have a temperature, do continue to be the downsides of even doing this type of testing. For alternative B, that is really about moving forward expeditiously, even though we recognize that there are still several questions, several issues that are not settled, again, particularly around some of the health partner issues and the airline participation. The pro around moving forward straight to mandatory health screenings would be the ability as a large hub airport to provide leadership around this issue. And again, the thought about having a deterrent for people coming to the airport sick if they know that they would be screened. Next slide, please. And then alternative C, and this is our staff recommended alternative. We have gained an incredible amount of knowledge through the proof of concept, and we think there is more information to be gleaned from this kind of an approach, which again would be voluntary, that would allow us to gain additional insights around some of the logistics. We've been at checkpoint 5. As you know, all of our checkpoints are just a little different, and so we would anticipate that the logistics that work at 5 would not necessarily then be the same logistics that would work at one of our other checkpoints. We also have interest from another airline, and there might be opportunities to work with other airlines and glean and learn from that experience. We also are really wanting to be clear about staffing levels, because it's an expensive aspect of this work. We don't want to staff too thin or too heavy, and so we'd be able to get a better sense of what that right staffing level would be. It would also give us a little more time to understand the federal landscape. And again, I mentioned earlier the legislation that had been introduced. We don't know if that will have the opportunity to really progress. We don't know if, as the fall unfolds, perhaps TSA or a different federal agency will come back and look at this issue and become more inclined to move forward on it. But it gives us a little bit of time to better understand the federal landscape as well. Again, as the cons, we understand that this is has an expense, and that those would be tax levy associated expenses. This gives us some time to continue to secure our health partners. And we also recognize that we've really seen few people with elevated temperatures, and so I think that's a consideration as well. As we really thought about, though, the charge that you all gave us in your May 12th motion to explore it, we felt like this was really the next responsible step, would be to further do some proof of concept testing. In terms of additional next steps, we recognize that COVID-19 and the evolution of rapid tests being available would be something that would be a real likelihood for an airport to be involved with, especially if you were talking about very, very rapid tests. So there's still a lot of unknowns around testing, around paperwork associated with testing, but as we look ahead, we think there are probably areas where the airport will have a nexus with some of those issues. We also, there may be another alternative that as the Commission, you've been thinking about this, that you would like us to be considering, so we certainly want to be open to that. And then if there is an interest by the Commission in moving toward another proof of concept, we would recognize the need to be able to secure that private staffing, the healthcare staffing, and would be in a position to bring to you at your August meeting on August 11th a request to have the authority delegated to our executive director to be able to enter into that kind of a contract. Next slide, please. So at this time, we want to thank you for your assistance, your attention, your insights around these issues, and we would be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Great presentation with a lot of takeaways. I'd like to open this up now for Commission questions and comments.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Filliman.
Well, thank you very much for that thorough presentation, and I'm glad to see that we continue to explore opportunities to increase the public's confidence in travel, and that there is reason to be confident in travel. You know, I have a related question about the signage. I know that we were also looking at doing signage for, you know, there's people's concerns about public privacy and stuff like that. That there was also similar concerns were raised with regards to a facial recognition, and I didn't know whether I was hoping to see some examples of signs that we've put up in addition to whatever TSA has required in that regard. So while you're in the signage mode, can you give us an update on that as well?
Commissioner, yes, and I would be happy to follow up with a broader comprehensive overview on the communication around facial recognition. It's not front and center of our Fly Healthy work, but I certainly appreciate the connectivity, and we will have some of that signage to share with you. I just regret I don't have that information today at hand.
But it is very clear to people who are going through the line that this is an opt-in pilot project and not an obligation in order to board a plane or anything like that, that at least with regards to temperature testing, there's no uncertainty about that.
That's right. Our signs do make it very clear that no information is being gathered, and that is a voluntary process. And as we think ahead, I also wanted to mention that another opportunity to think about the future is some work that we're going to be doing with YVR, the airport in Canada, in Vancouver, and with PNWR, the Pacific Northwest Economic Region. They have been thinking about the future, looking at some of the COVID-19 related testing and some of those other kinds of programs and considerations. I know a couple of our commissioners have had conversations with them as well, and so our staffs are working together and going to be putting forward some plans to work on together. And so we're exploring these issues and thinking beyond just the immediate future and thinking longer range, as you are as well, Commissioner. I appreciate the question about biometrics, and we will continue to be discussing that with commissioners as well.
Just one more quick thing regarding Fly Healthy. I understand we actually did some acceleration of touchless faucets and things like that. Was something that I was anxious to hear about when I first arrived. Is this
yes,
being accelerated?
Yeah, one of the initiatives that we set into motion, I just want to give a huge shout out to our maintenance crew and to Gina Kim's leadership, was around our touchless towel dispensers. We had 270 units that were the old manual, and those have been replaced throughout the summer, and that job is now completed. And just, you know, those are those simple yet really important touch points that we have been focused on, and just a shout out to that group that really did that in an expedited manner.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving to Commissioner Cho for comments.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I just think I wanted to express my gratitude to the entire team for all the work they've done we keep hearing that we're in uncharted territory, and I think this was truly uncharted territory for us as a port. And so I appreciate all the work you've done, Julie, Lance, and the rest of the team, in trying to figure out and navigate the complexities of some of these things. So great work, and I look forward to it all getting executed.
Thank you. Commissioner Calkins.
Yeah, thank you so much, team, for all the great work you've done on this. I just want to point out a sort of finding that we're all concluding as a part of this work, and I say we at CTAC, but I think largely in the aviation community, which is this idea that we need to shift people's paradigm around flying, that at the end of the day, no one should fly when they're sick. Whether it's a common cold or the flu or COVID or anything else that might be transmissible while traveling, and that the implications of programs like this are, one, we recognize that a lot of the efforts that we're taking in Fly Healthy are educational efforts. They're reminding people before they ever set foot outside their door to come to the airport that they've done a basic health screening to make sure that they are safe to fly. And that's a responsibility that each of us has as individuals to our community, particularly in a time of pandemic. And so while the efficacy of any given measure that we can undertake at the airport is limited, it's still utterly essential that we do this education and encouragement work to change the paradigm around flying. It's never appropriate to fly when you're sick, except in very rare circumstances. And so with that, I think the work that you've done already is paying dividends. So thank you so much.
Okay.
Commissioner Bowman.
Great, thank you. Julie and team, thanks so much for the presentation and the update. Just a couple of quick questions. I'm curious if there's been any specific lessons learned from the Honolulu Port Authority and their temperature check program, and specifically, what has been their experience? My understanding is that program is mandatory. Have we any lessons learned from their experience in terms of how they've dealt with passengers that have resisted temperature checks? Additionally, do they have any experience with any reimbursements from the federal government that for equipment or staffing that we might take a look at?
Thank you, Commissioner, and certainly the Hawaii experience, the Honolulu experience has been really interesting. They were very early in mandating those temperature checks, as you know, and I think right off, one of the distinctions that really set them apart was that their airport being part of their state government, and so that seamless that seamless connection between a health department, between National Guard, really all came together, and so that has been one of their distinctions, if you will. I know that our security director, Wendy Ryder, has been in ongoing contact, as has Lance, with their director, and I think that in general, the public has been receptive. The other layer that they had in addition to the temperature checks was the quarantine, and I think if you want to talk about a deterrent, that certainly became a really, I think, visible part of their overall approach was having that quarantine aspect as well.
And if I could add to that, Commissioner, I've spoken to the director there a few times, as well as Julie said, one of the major advantages that the airport is a state-run airport, so all the health entities are part of the state, so they could get that support. The other thing that we learned is cost, and how their airport are configured. It's easier to funnel incoming passengers, arriving passengers. It's domestic, but they can actually funnel them through a smaller portal than it would be for us, where we have 80-something gates where people could arrive at any of those gates. But the cost of the operation, and I think they're planning to go full-blown with the entire thing. So that one of the lessons that we learned from them is how much it would cost to do a full-blown operation at the airport as well.
Great. So, but following up on the questions, have we learned anything specific about how they were able to make their temperature checks mandatory? And then the second part of my question was, have they been able to secure any federal funding, maybe not through TSA or CBP, but perhaps through FEMA or other organizations or other agencies that we might tap into as well to help offset the costs?
I am not aware of any federal fund apart from the TSA reimbursement and the FEMA reimbursement, which we have as well. We have access to. I'm not aware of any additional funding outside of those two that they have access to. I'm not sure if Julie or Wendy has any additional information on that.
I don't have anything to add to that.
Unmute Wendy now.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
You can.
Okay, so Lance is correct. They do not have any additional funding outside of what we have too. And it's approximately $38 million that it's costing them. Also, you would ask Commissioner the question, they have not had elevated temperature. They have had concerns with people that originally they had started out with quarantining, that you had to quarantine for 2 weeks when you came into Hawaii. They did have some issues with passengers that were not quarantining like they were supposed to, and they actually sent them back when they were not following the directive. And all of this has come from the directive of Hawaii, the state of Hawaii. So, and it's all interrelated. The state, the health department, they're all interrelated. So as Julie said, much easier to be able to coordinate, but no elevated temperatures to my knowledge. And that was about 3 weeks ago that I spoke to them. So.
Great. Thank you so much for that follow-up. And maybe at another time somebody can provide maybe a little additional detail about how they deal with passengers that are refusing their temperatures to be taken. I mean, I'm going specifically to the point of whether it's mandatory or voluntary. My understanding of the Hawaii program is that it is mandatory.
That is
they
correct.
Don't have a choice.
That's
okay.
Right. It is mandatory, and they get sent back if they don't. Yes.
Okay. And I'm just wondering, we don't need it now, but maybe there's some lessons learned about how they got that authority to do that. So thank you.
Sure.
And then I believe Commissioner Cho had a follow-up comment.
Yeah, I think comments and questions. So,
okay, so I think one detail that's worth mentioning is that Hawaii's approach was, I don't want to say fundamentally, but philosophically different from ours. We've been focusing on people coming into the airport and leaving Seattle, and Hawaii has been mainly focused on people coming into Hawaii, which is two very different things. And so I think that was a distinction that maybe someone just can speak to, but I wanted to point that out, that that is a very clear distinction in approach that our two states have had.
Okay.
And then moving on to Commissioner Steinbruck, did you have any comments?
I have several questions here, more detailed in nature. I would like better information on the actual costs of this pilot program in terms of staffing and rental equipment, whatever, and total cost, since it's not being borne by aviation funds and coming out of our levy. I'm struck by the fact that the coronavirus made its way to the United States most likely through air travel. And air travel has taken a pretty significant hit with regard to the 90% fall off that we've seen. And yet there doesn't appear to be any real active support on the part of health authorities locally and beyond for implementing some simple measures such as temperature checks and health screenings at one of the locations that is probably the highest concentration of travelers that you'll find anywhere in one location at the airport, and internationally as well. So I'm really puzzled by the resistance that it sounds like we've received. Maybe it's a lack of resources. Is it an indifference? Is it the legal constraints as far as if detection of potentially risky passengers is discovered, then what? And we haven't really truly tested this program as a pilot until we encounter passengers who have maybe been tested, temperature checked, and they have elevated temperatures. I suspect also the positive reception is that there is a sense that this is actually achieving something good in terms of traveler safety. And I know that internationally it's a far common practice, temperature checks. So people who have done any international travel would know that this is very common elsewhere, but under different legal circumstances and other mandates that we don't have here. I don't understand why the equipment is so expensive. I've seen these handheld digital temperature thermometers, I guess they are, that probably are nowhere close to the cost of the equipment we're using at SeaTac. So I really don't understand this $30,000 per device thing. And a handheld can be maybe just as effective held up to the wrist or the neck that I've seen commonly used in other countries. So I also would like to know, how long does this program as a pilot continue? When do we conclude that, well, we've gotten, we've gotten the takeaways, we've gotten a determination on the, on the reliability and the problems, proof of concept, as you say. But I do think we need more information about the costs and the viability. And also, there are other ways to approach the issue of restoring traveler confidence. In particular, as Commissioner Calkins has suggested and outlined, a strong information campaign regarding individual responsibility when traveling and what's expected there. So we have different ways that we can spend public dollars, I think, besides a pilot that may eventually run its course because we have no authority and we have no partners in it, which are some of my concerns here. I'll stop there, but maybe you could answer some of my questions about the actual costs and continuation of this pilot program. For how long? Is it indefinite? When will we conclude that we have done what we can?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Steinbrueck, and those were really good questions and covered a lot of ground, and I will try my best to address them directly. In terms of the cost, the equipment, and I'm really, my colleague Dave Wilson, who did the research, who has been looking into the various types of equipment, would be best suited to give you the more technical expertise around why this equipment has been chosen. My understanding is that it really allows for a broader, freer movement of the passengers, as opposed to stopping each person individually. The camera is set up on a tripod, if you will, and the line is free-flowing. And that was certainly one of the considerations in addition to accuracy and sophistication of the equipment. I know it's similar equipment that other airports such as DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth have also been looking at. So I think it's really about the ability to have a number of people move through unimpeded is why this equipment is one of the reasons that it's attractive as opposed to the individual.
So
and we will follow up. Yeah.
Add to that answer as well, Julie. So Commissioner, yes, you're correct. The handheld thermometers, they're cheaper, but you require someone. So you need a person to be there. That adds to the cost. Not only that, it impacts the flow of traffic. And if you look at some of the airports, international airports that have people with a handheld, the traffic is usually lower. If you look at, say, Hong Kong airport, for example, where there's a lot of traffic, you'll see cameras similar to the ones that we have that they're using. So throughput is one, but cost is another to have someone there. And then with the cameras, you reduce the need to be in any close contact or proximity with somebody else as well.
How do you administer a volunteer program with a broad reach like that, though? Because if you're capturing multiples of people, how do we confirm that it's voluntary?
The actual camera is set up within the checkpoint queue. So a person may decide before they go through the queue, it's very clearly marked that there's temperature checks underway. And if for whatever reason they prefer not to go through that, through the temperature checks, they can just go through a different part and enter the queue. They don't have to go through that area. So it really is more of that determination at the beginning of the queue whether they want to go through that lane or not.
Okay. And have you been able to compile a total cost of this so far, what's been spent?
In terms of what has been spent, we have the two pieces of equipment that were purchased. One was actually purchased for Pier 69, one for the airport. I believe both of those pieces are now at the airport. So that is $60,000. And then the staffing right now would be attributed to our tax levy. Those are the two primary costs that are happening right now through this proof of concept. And you asked about the length. This particular one that's underway would end on the 31st of July. So we're in the last few final days of it. And so it really would be at the meeting on August 11th and in preparation for that meeting where we would have all of the dollar costs much more in hand, having gone through that solicitation process and having a clear sense of who our preferred provider would be.
Okay, yeah, I would expect to hear much more specific information on the total costs, and particularly going forward into a second phase. And given that we haven't been, it's really unclear whether this will become a semi-permanent as we continue in our crisis. And if so, then I think we need to understand the full cost benefit more clearly going forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we would have those kinds of specific costs, and that staffing being the most important part of that equation.
Okay. All right. Are there any further commissioner questions or comments before we move on?
I believe Executive Director Metric had something to add.
All right.
Thanks, commissioners, and thanks, Lance and Julie and Wendy. I think we're still gathering that information. Again, the staff has been doing excellent work. There's a lot of developments that are continuing to develop on this. Of course, we know that the holy grail is that national, international system where we have consistent standards. But with that, I think the staff is doing great work of laying the groundwork of the pieces, that we're working on. And I know there's some questions here, but I think we're going to continue to gather that information and come back with that proposed way forward.
Okay, sounds good.
Commissioner Steinbreck, would you like me to go back through the list of commissioners?
Yeah, let's give commissioners one more opportunity if they'd like to.
Thank you. We'll start with Commissioner Felleman then. Commissioner Felleman, any additional comments for this item?
Now I've got it. No, I need no further questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Cho, for you?
No further questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Calkins?
None from me either.
Thank you. Commissioner Bowman?
No further comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commission President, I think that this is the end of this item.
Okay, excellent. Thanks very much. We'll look forward to the next update on FlyHealthy SEA.